The Buccaneers. Did the book or TV show do it better? Let's start with the character differences from the page to the screen. We have our first Buccaneer, Annabelle Nan St. played by Kristen Froseth. In the book, she is described as being slender and tall with large dark eyes. Her hair is thick with brown gold curls, and she has a small face. In the series, Froseth is slender and has the same hair as her book counterpart, but she is of average height. The next Buccaneer I want to talk about is Nan's sister, Virginia Jinny St. portrayed by Imogen Waterhouse. In the book, she is described as having radiant lips, bright wheat-colored hair, and blue eyes. She is considered fair and elegant with graceful shape and beauty that outshines the others in her social circle. In the adaptation, Waterhouse matches her book counterpart's physical description pretty spot on. Our third Buccaneer is Conchita, played by Alicia Bowe. In the novel, she is described as having dusky skin and nearly red hair. She is also tall and thin and has pale, starry eyes. In the series, Bowe is a bit tanner than her book counterpart and also lacks the red hair, with the production opting instead to use the actress's more natural hair color. Bowe is also shorter than her book counterpart. Next up is the fourth Buccaneer, Elizabeth Lizzy Elmsworth, portrayed by Aubrey Ibrig. In the novel, she is described as having dark hair and a dark complexion with black eyebrows that have a bold curve. Lizzy is noted to have style in the novel, which was valued more than beauty in some social circles at the time. In the adaptation, Ibrig is lighter in complexion than her book counterpart, but still maintains the dark eyebrows. Her character does have style, but so do most of the other characters in the series. Our last Buccaneer is Lizzy's sister, Mabel Elmsworth, played by Josie Tota. She is described in the book as being softer and more womanly compared to the others. She is also not at all showy and is more poised than the others without being cold. In the series, Tota matches her character's description pretty spot on, honestly. We also need to talk about some of the suitors of the story, like Guy Thwart, played by Matthew Broome. In the novel, he is described as tall and lean with gray eyes and a face that becomes thinner over the course of the book. In the series, Broome matches his character's description pretty spot on, although his face doesn't necessarily thin out over the course of the series like it is described in the book. Another suitor is Theo Ushant, portrayed by Guy Rimmers. In the novel, he is an aristocrat and a landowner who has long avoided marriage, which has made some fans actually speculate that he may have been written as a closeted gay man. In the series, the queer undertones have been entirely removed, or minimized at least, thanks to his love for Nan and then later Lizzy. Now, let's talk about the biggest story changes between the book and the TV adaptation. One of the biggest plot differences between the novel and the Apple TV Plus adaptation is that Nan is adopted. In the show, it is revealed that Nan is not a St. George child after all. After being presented to society at the debutante ball, Jinny blows up at her sister for taking away all of the attention and tells her that one of her father's affairs actually produced Nan. Their mother, Patty, played by Christina Henderson, forgave their father and decided to raise Nan as one of her own. This character plotline is completely absent from the book. Another major change in the show is the romantic relationship between Mabel and Honoria, played by Mia Thrippleton. In the novel, they are minor characters, each with their own sort of disappointing stories about marriage, but in the TV series, their queer relationship is given real attention and care, becoming one of the central storylines. This is a completely new addition that brings the show in line with today's focus on diversity and inclusion. While Edith Wharton, the author of the novel, was familiar with LGBTQ plus individuals and sometimes hinted at queer themes in subtle ways, she never openly explored same-sex love in her writing. By making this change, the series is giving the story a modern update, though it also shifts away from the quiet, layered social critique that's a hallmark of most of Wharton's work. Conchita's storyline also highlights a major shift between the book and the series. In the book, she is portrayed as a reckless young woman whose marriage to a British aristocrat quickly leaves her isolated and rejected by high society. She ends up a quiet casualty of the rigid class system. The series, however, reimagines her as bold, confident, and full of personality, perhaps the most unapologetically free-spirited of the group. Instead of being broken by her marriage, she stands up to her husband's family, keeps custody of her child, and refuses to conform to the aristocratic expectations. She often becomes the emotional glue that holds the Buccaneers together, emphasizing themes of friendship and solidarity that are much more pronounced in the Apple TV Plus series than in the original novel. At its core, the most significant difference between the two forms of media is their outlook on the world. Wharton saw the struggles of wealthy women in the Gilded Age as tragic conflict where personal desires were constantly at odds with the strict social expectations of the time. Her characters often gave in to these pressures not because they were weak, but because the system was too powerful to overcome. In contrast, the TV adaptation flips that idea. The women in the series push back. They shout, rebel, they fall in love on their own terms, and they chase their own version of happiness, even if it's messy or short-sighted. Where Wharton offers a graceful kind of sadness, the show replaces it with a bold hope, turning constraint into adventure and failure into chance for growth. Now, let's talk about what the series got right and what it got wrong. One of the main strengths of the show is how it modernizes the source material and makes it work. In an era with period shows like Bridgerton and Outlander and Gilded Age that take their stories and add modern themes for modern audiences, the Buccaneers adaptation takes this a step further. While Wharton's novel was, of course, way ahead of its time when it was published in 1938, the series brings to life young protagonists' free-loving spirits in a way that connects more with modern audiences, such as through rave parties and secret relationships and even LGBTQ+ characters. All of these are elements that were obviously absent from the novel. Another major strength is how the series adapts the themes of female empowerment and youthful exuberance. Almost every major female character has a moment where she says something that sounds like it came from a beginner's feminism class, a basic reminder that young women are people who deserve respect and control over their own lives. Even though these lines can feel awkward or forced, the message still hits home, especially since this is the kind of story that hasn't always made space for it. In this series, the bold, loud attitude often associated with Americans helps spark important changes in England. And even when their speeches about empowerment feel a bit clumsy, the characters back them up by actually taking charge of their own lives. These girls don't always make good choices, especially not Nan. In fact, they often make very bad ones, but the Buccaneers support their right to make these choices for themselves, even if they're bad ones. And as much as the series has its strengths, it did have a few weaknesses too. One major weakness of the adaptation is that it focuses the majority of the story on Nan's arc and her cringeworthy love triangle with Theo and Guy. This took the attention away from the other girls' individual journeys that were all laid out in the novel. Their development as fully fleshed out characters suffered greatly at the cost of portraying an uneven Sophie's Choice dilemma for Nan. I mean, just look at the lack of clarity in the writing when you compare Nan's chemistry with Guy and Theo. The writers of the show focused more on developing the drama between the three rather than intertwining a lot more of the Buccaneers, often losing sight of what made the original novel so successful in the first place. Which leads me to another weakness of this adaptation: the artistic liberties to change major parts of the novel's plot. The Buccaneers places a lot more focus on Nan and Conchita, yet neither of their characters is necessarily given the depth they deserve. Their portrayals feel exaggerated and underdeveloped, making them difficult to connect with on an emotional level. Conchita's storyline in particular suffers from being too closely tied to Richard's narrative, which overshadows her individuality. Rather than exploring her own arc, she becomes a secondary figure in his journey of confronting past trauma. Additionally, her emotional shifts are portrayed in a way that lacks nuance, swinging abruptly from despair to excitement, which feels more like a stereotype than a genuine representation of mental health and its complexity. All right, so which one wins, the book or the TV series? For me, the TV series ultimately wins. Apple TV Plus modernizes Edith Wharton's classic novel for a new generation, keeping mostly intact the things that made the source material so charming and iconic, while adding new layers and depth to the characters, even if they're sometimes questionable. But what did you think? Did the adaptation do the book justice, or do you prefer the original? Or the previous adaptation? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and I'll see you next time right here on Collider.